I was at Food and Wine for exactly 6 months before I had to do a panel with Julia in Aspen, and I asked her the question that was on my mind because, the thing I was trying to do at Food and Wine was make it fresh and new and newsworthy. And I asked Julia, so what is new and newsworthy? And she looked at me and she said, that is a media question, and I won't answer it. I'd like to say it got better from there. I mean, the thing that really broke my Julia Child, anxiety and fear was getting into a car with her in Boston, a very small car. She's a very large woman, and she drove just in a very scary way. So we were very lucky at Food and Wine to have her as a contributing editor, though I think from time to time, she thought our test kitchen was a little overambitious in revising her French recipes. In any case, that's not what I'm talking about today, but I couldn't resist with that intro. I'm going to talk about a job that's a dream and then stops being so dreamy. What happens next? So since being a college intern at a very poorly named women in business magazine called Savvy, I had one dream, and one dream only. I wanted to be an editor-in-chief. And in fact, a friend of mine reminded me that my freshman year, my first year at Vogue magazine, when she's like, I'd be so happy if I was ever a senior editor. I'm like, dude, I want to be editor-in-chief. She reminded me that I have no recollection of that, but I guess it's true. I wanted to oversee the editorial vision of a magazine, which now seems a little quaint, like magazine versus brand, but that's what I wanted. And in 1995, my dream came true, and I was made the editor-in-chief of Food and Wine magazine. But it was under very unusual circumstances. The magazine was on the brink of failure. And I'm not kidding. They were considering changing the name to Food and pretty much anything but wine because a magazine distributor had told them that wine was really suppressing sales on the newsstand. It's like, okay, let's try something else. Or they wanted to cut back to 6 issues. Or, maybe they could hire someone who was out of the box, extremely cheap, had never been an editor-in-chief before, and really believed they could turn around the brand. And it turns out that they chose door number 3, and that was me. I convinced the head of American Express Publishing that they were doing it all wrong, that this magazine that was basically devoted to 8 ways to cook eggplant and low-fat cooking could actually be something so much more. And there had been these seeds of really phenomenal content. Food and Wine was born as a brand so I said brand, it was really born as a magazine, inside Playboy. How many people knew that Food and Wine magazine started inside Playboy? 17 pages. Kevin's so good at giving presents. Kevin, why didn't you give me Playboy? That would have been a really good gift. In any case, there I was, convincing this guy that food was going to be the center of everybody's life. Like, you can't see it now, but I promise you, in the future, it's going to be food and wine, food and design, food and travel, food and everything, food and sports, thing I know nothing about. And that it would be chefs and discovery that would lead the way. And he's like, why not? So building this brand was so much fun. I focused on this very clear mission that I had, assigning incredible writing, recipes, and photography, hiring great editors. Pete Wells, I gave Pete Wells his first editor job. I don't know how many people in the room think that was a good thing that I did or not a good thing that I did, but Pete actually did the best single editor's test in my 21 years at Food and Wine. The guy's a fantastic writer, but he's a beautiful editor. As Kevin said, we spend a lot of time focusing on the best new chefs, focusing on the future of talent. I got to travel halfway around the world, or in fact, all the way around the world, just to eat a single meal, which now I'm actually feeling sort of bad about because of the, climate and the miles. But back in the day, that was great, one meal, very long trip. And my office was right next to two very important rooms. There was the kitchen, and I was brought food 7 times a day to taste what the test kitchen was cooking from contributing chefs, and their own cooking as well. And the other room was the wine room. And I have never gotten over the fact that I had 21 years of free wine that I could bring home by the case, all in the guise of, this is my work. I have to understand what is happening all around the world in wine. So I was pretty wired with joy, which is funny because I think everybody on this stage, like if we had a drinking game and it was like every time someone says joy, take a drink, we'd be pretty drunk right now. But it was a really joyful job. And then one day, after almost 2 decades, my energy was sputtering, and I realized it was time to move on. And to quote Alpana, it was time for the next hill. And so that's what we're going to talk about. What happens when your dream job isn't so dreamy? What happens when you or your industry evolves? What happens if you've never even found the dream job and you really want to? My aha moment took place during an outstanding trip to Japan. And as far as I can see, that is a very strange place to have a nervous breakdown, to fall apart. But that's what happened. Kate Crater, how many people know who Kate Crater is? Restaurant editor of Food and Wine for a couple of decades. She scored a table for us at Noma, the pop-up in Tokyo, from Rene Redzepi. How many people have had a Noma meal? Okay, the front of the room's doing really well with these. The rest of you, Noma is amazing. And it was one of those pinnacle memories from Food and Wine. I still remember the parade of courses. And there's a lot of talking and conversation about the forged wood ants from Nagano. And the stories about visiting dozens of artisans in a dozen cities throughout Japan over an entire year. It was incredibly special. From Tokyo and that amazing meal, we all went to Kyoto. And for 2 days, we ate and we shopped. Love shopping. But for these things, we went to knife makers, and we went to ceramists, and we went to broom makers. The brooms of Japan actually are the things I really fell in love with, and the sponges. And the thing is, I could barely walk. I hobbled. And on the 3rd day, instead of going to this insanely exclusive multi-course tasting, I went back to the hotel, I got a massage, and got into bed. And my friends were really worried about me. The hotel people were knocking on my door, checking on me. But my body was talking to me very loudly, and it was saying, something is very wrong. So I talked back to myself, hi, herniated disc? Did I sprain something? Honestly, I had no idea. I called my husband in the middle of the night from this gorgeous bed, in this gorgeous room, in this gorgeous hotel in Kyoto, and was heaving with sobs. And all of my anxiety just tumbled out of me. At Food and Wine, I had just completed a redesign, and it felt pretty, but honestly, kind of unexciting. I'd twisted the content and the design and the photography so many times in so many different ways over 2 decades that nothing I was doing felt like it was groundbreaking, which had been my goal at the beginning. And we kept, year after year, we kept trying to break the design and break the photography and do new things. I felt like I didn't have it. The magazine, it was good, but it wasn't really enough. And on top of that, the media world was collapsing. So I wanted to be somewhere that I was going to be growing, that I was going to be engaged, that I was going to be trying new things, and I wanted a shot at something else before it was too late. As we heard on the stage earlier, Society doesn't ask us, what is the dream job past 40? And I was in my mid-50s. I wanted to do something new before I was obstructed by ageism, sexism, or what I like to call techism. I actually went on an interview, it was like an informational interview with someone at a digital platform. And he was like, you are the gold standard. And I'm like, oh. But you're too old, you're too expensive, and you don't know anything about digital. You are never going to get another job. I was like, okay then. That was a great motivator to me, and still motivates me, even though I'm not sure that was his point. I just knew at that time I wanted to do something different. I just didn't know what. So back to me sobbing in bed, right? That was a little sobbing in bed. So my husband, Barkley, is amazing. And he, from New York, told me, it's all going to be okay. I was going to be okay. Leaving was going to be okay. Starting again was okay. Not starting again was okay. Hiding under the covers was okay. I mean, you get the idea. I was going to be okay. And that unconditional acceptance of what I wanted, and also his belief in what I could become, somehow unfroze me. And the next day, I know this sounds really nuts, but the next day, I could walk. And it was kind of a miracle. And I realized in that middle of the night that I could love something as deeply and truly as I love Food and Wine, the magazine, Food and Wine, the team, Food and Wine, lowercase, and still want to make a change. Both can be true simultaneously. Even though for 20 years, I'd kind of been afraid of this moment, the moment when the dream went sour, the idea of quitting didn't actually feel brave or scary. And now that I've been through it, I'm actually grateful for the blind optimism that allowed me to step wildly and willfully forward. Not second-guessing myself was my greatest gift. There was a hitch, though, which is I did need to find a job. And it wasn't like, ooh, this is so great, I get to quit. What am I? And I felt like it'd be particularly hard for me to accept if I didn't have another job that I was going to. And one thing that was always in the back of my mind was like, yeah, if I have another job, people will know this was my decision, which was very important to me at the time. So I landed a job at a place called Chef's Club, which is a restaurant that we had developed at Food and Wine in conjunction with the St. Regis in Aspen. And it had been bought by a consortium of Thai billionaires who had huge ambitions. And I was like, that's so obvious, like so natural for me, like I found it. During the interview process was months long. And I would get these emails and my stomach would just clench. And my body obviously is very loud and speaks very clearly to me. And it was saying like, Dana, this is such a bad idea. Don't do this. This guy is not right for you. And I took the job anyway because I wanted a fast exit, and this is my exit. And wow, it was an impressively bad fit. And a year after I started, I quit again. And in that experience, I learned one essential truth, which is if you're working for someone who doesn't respect you, you need to change. Disrespect is corrosive and can damage the ego of even the most confident, sunny-side-up person. After leaving, I lined up a variety of consulting gigs. Huge shout out to Dig In, which was my consulting home for 2.5 years. I got to do marketing and PR and menu development, and it was so interesting to be on your side of the business rather than the editorial side, but doing very editorially minded things. But it wasn't the same. And I can tell you this now, which I think I would have firmly denied earlier, but it felt a little bit like Jell-O before it was set. I was a little wobbly and a little uncertain. This out-of-sorts feeling was exacerbated by the interactions at parties with people in the hospitality industry, people like you out in the world, events like the Stellar Welcome Conference in New York City, which I had the privilege of going to many times. And I'd be introduced as she was the one who was the editor-in-chief of Food and Wine for, a couple of decades. Full stop, it was actually like hearing my obituary while I was still alive and well. And I was peeved, and yet, on the other hand, I wasn't entirely sure that I was undead. That voice of criticism in my head was my own, and I was determined to get over it. One way to do that, I thought, was to come up with a big plan, and I went all in. I got together a group of friends, and we did a visioning session, complete with markers and like a whiteboard, the whole nine. I went to psychics, I read self-help books, I went to an energy healer, I talked to friends of friends. I actually went online and ordered my birth certificate so that I could find out what time I was born and go to an astrologer. I got a coach, and I had these amazing ideas, and I treated them all like I was putting together a magazine, which meant it had a mission, it had a name, it had a website, and let me tell you, I made everything so complicated. And planning became an obstacle to doing. So I stopped planning and started thinking about what I cared about that I could move forward with very little friction. So at the time, it was a moment of peak podcasting, and I emailed the director of the all-food nonprofit radio station, Heritage Radio Network, who I'd met at a party, and I was like, "Hi, I would love to have a podcast." And she was like, "Sure." And so Speaking Broadly was born out of me saying, well, what's the easiest editorial thing I could do, because I really missed sharing other people's stories. And now I've produced around 150 episodes highlighting extraordinary women in hospitality. That podcast led to a zine of the same name, and I just finished a 10-city tour going all over the country. I had a stop in Chicago, which was awesome, with Kevin at Beyond and also at Wherewithal with incredible women chefs. And I also, so that was fulfilling the editorial part of my brain. I've also been informally coaching people for years, and I wanted to see if this path had potential. So I reached out to a friend of a friend at a women's member-only workspace, not accredited, so I'm not using its name, and asked if I could do days of free coaching at their locations in exchange for a membership, which I guess isn't technically free, but whatever. And they said yes. And after I did a live coaching session with someone on a stage with an audience, and I had a line of people after that saying, "Can I pay you to coach me?" And I was like, "Yes, you can." And that's when my coaching business was born. So now I coach people all over the world, and I had the luck of doing this while I was also doing that, like consulting for Dig and other food brands. So these paid gigs helped fund the R&D for my own project Next. So through a lot of testing and trying and believing and failing and recalibrating and hard work with my own coach, I managed to disconnect my sense of self-worth from my job title. And that is when the larger, slow-rolling, well-earned epiphany came. I wanted to shift my thinking away from what is the job I want to perform, and started shifting towards what impact I wanted to have. I wanted to do something that was long-lasting and actually not measurable. Gradually, I realized that the myriad tiny choices that I'd made over the last 6 years were leading me in a singular direction. And this is something that I think that you all will understand better than any other group of people in the universe. I wake up every day to make the world a more hospitable place. And I do that by nurturing people and the planet. And I almost hate to say that sentence because it actually sounds like something a branding agency would be hired to write, but I promise you, it popped into my head after reading like one of my many self-help books that, to inspire the coaching, of course. So toward that goal, I decided to expand my coaching, and I'm launching a free coaching project for people in the industry who don't have access to mentorship next month. And I'm also adding a VIP version of my existing coaching, creating personalized roadmaps for self-realization. And I'm also creating an editorial and events platform to help those humans and the planet. It's tentatively called Feeding Broadly. Like Sam said earlier, food is at the center of so many of our problems, and food can help solve them. So with Feeding Broadly, I want people to get excited about the stories behind food that is helping the climate rather than damaging the climate. So he's doing the Last Supper, which I think is an inspired idea. I'm kind of doing the opposite. I'm like, hey, where's all the positive food? Like, what can we eat that's actually going to be better for us and better for the planet? Let's make a meal of that, and then let's all get together around the table and share like stories about ourselves and stories about our future. So I'm just at the beginning of it, having finished the Speaking Broadly tour. It's a big idea, and as I told you before, like I'm not stopping to figure out the website. I'm sorting out everything from the business model to a platform to partner with, and I'm having as many conversations as possible to help me make this project the best it can possibly be. At the beginning of this talk, I told you I was going to address the question of what happens when a dream runs its course, or you never had the dream job and you still want one. Actually, if any of you in the audience are in your perfect, absolutely dreamy job, you can like take a couple minutes and just go through Instagram. But for the rest of you, here are a few final thoughts about going beyond your wildest dreams. Number one, you don't need a big, all-encompassing vision. Number two, start small. Start with a couple of things that you are intensely curious about or excited by that are easily within your grasp, something with very little friction. Number three, commit to doing whatever those things you chose are, whether you know where you're going or you don't. Number four, once you're committed, ask for feedback. And this next part is very important, and it sort of makes me laugh because everybody who's on the stage has given you homework. Like, do you feel like you've been given a bunch of homework so far? You have things you have to write in your journal because of Will. I think that's amazing. And Dory had us take a pledge, and that's amazing. But my number 5 is I want you to tell 2 people these small commitments that you're going to make. Someone who will keep you accountable, who will be in your life forever. And the second person is me. My email is on the screen behind me. Ha, yes it is, great. And I want you guys, you're not gonna believe this, but I really mean it, very sincerely. I want you to email me what it is, the small thing you want to do, or things, or big things, and I wanna hear from you. There's no time limit. You can do it today. You can do it in 3 weeks. Just promise me that you'll reflect on what you want and how to get there, and let me give you some feedback. I am here to cheer you on, to tell you to not turn back, that doing is always the right direction, that clarity is sometimes overrated, that staying when your heart says go is never right. And I'm going to leave you with one final question. Are you ready? Yeah. Woo! But can you stand and say it so I get a standing ovation? There we go. Kevin's leading the way. Yes, we can do it!